Just south of the Idaho border, the jagged walls of Jarbidge Canyon slice 15 miles into Nevada. Along the canyon floor flows the churning Jarbidge River. Gold was discovered here, and a mining camp was born. Jarbidge is a Shoshone word meaning evil spirit, and the name is apt, for there was evil lurking in the canyon that day. It was December 5th, 1916. High winds and drifting snows had made the trail almost impassable by the time the stagecoach, carrying the mail and $4,000 in coin, reached the top of Crippen Grade. Below was the town of Jarbidge. The narrow road with treacherous drop-offs was nearly obliterated by the fallen snow, and the driver, 30-year-old Fred Searcy, fought constantly to keep the stagecoach from plummeting over the edge of the grade. He shivered in the cold, with his gloved hands nearly frozen into claws, his eyebrows and lashes caked with frost. He was exhausted. He shifted his foot against the mail pouch beneath his seat, as if to assure himself it was still there. He was running late, and he wondered whether the miners, anxious to cash their paychecks, were getting worried. But the end of the journey was close at hand. Soon he would arrive in Jarbidge, pour himself a double whiskey, and sit by the nearest stove. With these comforting thoughts in mind, he snapped the reins of his team, and the animals picked up speed. As evening blanketed the area in darkness, Mrs. Dexter, who lived in a small house on the outskirts of the mining camp, looked up from her sewing at the sound of a shot. Someone shooting coyotes, she mused. But her thoughts had drifted elsewhere by the time the stagecoach passed by. Though Mrs. Dexter could barely see through the blinding snow, she knew Fred Searcy had finally made it into town with the mine payroll, and she phoned Postmaster John Fleming with the good news. But 4 hours later, there was still no sign of Searcy or his stagecoach. Postmaster Fleming alerted the authorities. A search party was quickly formed, and more than 30 men set out into the snowstorm. After an hour, the freezing night air forced some of the men to abandon the search, but a few trudged on into the darkness. Fred Searcy and his coach had to be somewhere along the road, but where? It was Neil Hendricks, a prospector, who first spotted the tracks that veered off the road onto an old trail no longer used. In a clump of willows, several hundred yards from the main street, the missing stagecoach was found shrouded in snow. But not even the blanket of white could obliterate the form slumped over the driver's seat. Fred Searcy had been shot once in the head. Spreading out, the search party quickly located several second-class mail sacks. They'd been split open, and blood-stained envelopes were scattered on the ground, their contents strewn about. But the first-class sacks, the ones containing the long-awaited payroll, were gone. Nothing more remained than a few rapidly disappearing footprints. Then the searchers came across prints that seemed to have been made by a dog. The next morning, the searchers set out to find the mysterious canine. They checked scores of animals before a big yellow dog was taken to the murder scene. The animal began digging furiously in the snow and uncovered a first-class mail pouch with a bloody handprint. The money was gone, but there were several letters, including one with a bloody thumbprint on it. The miners of Jarbidge had their first real clue to Searcy's murderer. Witnesses identified the dog as a stray befriended by a man named Ben Kuhl. 33 years old, Kuhl had come to Jarbidge as a cook for the miners, and he ran with a rough crowd. Among them were Ed Beck, a part-time miner, the cut-lipped Swede, a full-time drunk, and Billy McGraw, a miner with an indifferent attitude toward work. A hasty search of Ben Kuhl's cabin uncovered a .45 caliber revolver, recently fired. A single shell was missing. When the sheriff arrived on the scene, he was met by the justice of the peace and a witness of sorts, a big, shaggy, yellow dog. Ben Kuhl was taken into custody. In the fall of 1917, a trial was held in Elko, Nevada. The case for the prosecution was airtight. As the crime was recreated, the evidence against Kuhl was ominously clear. Someone had slipped out of town on Wednesday afternoon and climbed a hillside overlooking the road to Jarbidge. As the stagecoach approached, the killer leaped aboard and shot the driver. This was the shot that Mrs. Dexter had heard. The man who had driven past her house was not Fred Searcy, but his murderer. It could have been the perfect crime, until, that is, a dog led authorities to Ben Kuhl. During the trial, Kuhl tried unsuccessfully to throw blame on his friends Beck, the Cutlip Swede, and McGraw, but to no avail. He claimed at first that the gun was not his, that he had loaned it out. He claimed he'd been nowhere near the roadway that night, but he'd been drinking with friends. Those friends, however, failed to come forward. Although Kuhl pleaded innocent, it was a new twist in criminal identification that would prove to be his undoing. The prosecution introduced into evidence the mail pouch with the bloody handprint. Experts convinced the jury that the handprint had been made by Kuhl. It was the first time such identification was allowed in a United States courtroom. On October 6, 1917, Ben Kuhl was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. He appealed to the Nevada Supreme Court, but the opinion, written by Justice Pat McCarran, upheld the conviction, citing the bloody handprint. As the date of his execution approached, Kuhl finally confessed. He claimed that the driver, Fred Searcy, was going to help him fake the holdup, that Searcy had changed his mind, that the two had struggled for the gun, and Searcy had been killed accidentally. Although the court didn't believe him, it converted his sentence to life. Ben Kuhl was transferred to the Nevada State Prison, where he spent the next 26 years in maximum security, turned down for parole a record 27 times. In 1944, 60 years old and terminally ill, Kuhl was released. He died in Sacramento 6 months later. And the big yellow dog that led lawmen to the murderer? History lends no clue to its fate, but it's doubtful that Kuhl remembered him as man's best friend. And the gold? It was never recovered. Some say it still lies buried in the rugged terrain near Jarbidge, $4,000 in sparkling gold coins. And many Native Americans still believe that evil spirits still dwell in the region, and it could very well be true. But the robbery of the stage to Jarbidge continues to live on in Nevada's history, for it was the last stagecoach robbery in the United States.